Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Billy Watson TV. It gives me great pleasure to have a returning guest. He's just not been long on last month. He's back again with some interesting story to tell us. So we're looking forward to catching up with my old friend Mike Williams, Mr. Sage of Quay. How are you doing?
Billy, thank you. Thank you so much for asking me to come back on the show. And I do have an interesting story to tell the audience. It's a story or an event that took place back in December of 2019. It's the first time I'm telling the story publicly, and it has to do with our last interview. I talked about the possibility of a documentary that I was going to work on with Jay Widener on the Beatles' unofficial story. So I was going to collaborate with Jay, and we were going to pull this together. At least that was the premise. And I began the process of doing that. I reached out to 6 researchers that I have worked with in the past that I felt were very good researchers. Of the 6, 4 were able to make it, 2 could not because of personal matters. And I also mentioned that it looked like we had Tommy Harriet on board, which was very promising. But in that video, in that interview, I also mentioned that I couldn't make any commitments whether the documentary was going to happen or not going to happen. One of the pressing issues for me was the workload, because it would have pretty much fallen back on me as far as providing the content for the documentary. It's not to say that Jay wasn't going to work hard. I have a lot of respect for Jay. It's just that the documentary was hooking into my research. So there would have been a ton of work on my part to help pull it together. Now, I'm not adverse to doing a ton of work. I think I've shown that over the last decade or so, especially the last 8 years with the Beatles research. But there was something else at play. And so I let Jay know, going back a few days ago, I would not be able to participate in the documentary. And so what's the reason for that? It's because as I was working to get everything set up, to pull in the researchers that we needed to do the documentary so we can do the interviews, to pull the outline together for the documentary. So there had to be a storyboard created. And I sat down and did that. It should have taken me no more than 2 days in my spare time to pull that together, the outline in PowerPoint. It dragged out for about a week and a half, 2 weeks. And as I was going through the process of coordinating, helping Jay to pull this together, I was getting a very, very uneasy feeling about doing the documentary, specifically with regard to my participation in the documentary. So why is that? Going back to December 15th of 2019, something happened to me, and I'll refer to it as the event, that was very alarming. So to back up just a little bit, going back to, I guess, around September of 2019 or so, I was giving some updates to my subscribers about where I was at with coming out with the big presentation. Did the Beatles write all their own music? So that's what I was working on. And it took me a good 7 or 8 months to pull it all together and to do the voiceovers, create the charts and all that stuff.
It was about a 4.5-hour presentation, was it?
4.5 hours, that's right. And back earlier in 2019, I had put some dates out there when I expected to upload the documentary, and I missed those dates. And I missed those dates, well, one of the reasons was because there was a lot of information that I had to plow through. And every time I thought I was getting closer to the goal line, something else was pulled in. In other words, there was another discovery, another piece of research that I felt was important to bring in. So I was actually looking to get the documentary done, if I'm not mistaken, by year end of 2019. And that never happened. And things got delayed. And the reason why things got delayed was because on December 15th of 2019, I was at the island in our kitchen area, and I was doing what I do every morning. I had my laptop there, and I was putting posts up on the blog, and I was having a cup of coffee. And my wife was there, and she said to me that she was going to step out and go to the supermarket, which is only about 10 minutes from our house. And she said that she had to go pick up milk and eggs. So as I was there with my cup of coffee and finishing up the blog, all of a sudden, my wife had left now. I felt this very weird sensation come over my body. And I explained to the doctors and to the very few people that I've told this story to. And again, the reason why I'm telling this story is to give the backstory as to why I've decided not to go forward with the documentary. And everybody will understand why in a moment. I felt this sensation going through my body, and the way I explained it to the doctors, it felt like something had gone through me, and it was almost like I powered down. And I was sitting at the island. We had stools there, and I didn't feel right. And so I got up, and I thought, I need to go get my phone, which was in the bedroom, and I need to call my wife. I got about 8 feet from the chair. I got off the chair. I started walking, and I collapsed. I was down on my knees trying to get back up. I just could not get myself oriented. And I remember just kind of screaming. And I kept thinking to myself, I have to get to the phone. I have to get to the phone. I have to call my wife. I don't know what's going on here. It was very, very scary. So I finally make my way into the bedroom, and it wasn't an easy thing to do. I was halfway crawling there. I think I eventually got to my feet, but I needed to hold myself up by holding onto walls, furniture, the bed. And then when I finally got to the phone, I was so disoriented. My body movements were just uncontrollable, involuntary. And I had to focus on that phone because I had to hit the contacts to reach my wife. And I fumbled with the phone, and it was ringing, and she didn't pick up. And I thought, okay, this is not good, So I made my way over to the couch. I crawled up on the couch, and there was all of this pain, Billy. It was like shooting pain going through my chest, the back of my shoulder, down my arm, my left arm in particular. And sometimes it would shoot into my left leg. And to be perfectly honest, I thought I was a goner. I didn't know what was going on. I could not get control of my situation. Whatever happened took total control away from me. But I made my way onto the couch, and I was on the couch. I was laying down, and my wife came in. And she saw me there, and she came running over. And this is the very strange part. The part I'm telling you is strange, but it gets even stranger. When my wife was at the supermarket, she was picking up the eggs, and she felt a jolt, a pulse go through her as well. And it resulted in her tossing the eggs up in the air.
Wow.
They fell on the floor in the supermarket. And she said she just instinctually knew, forget about that, I need to get home.
Wow, I've got goosebumps.
All true. All true. So when she got home, she saw me lying on the couch, and she said, what's going on? And I was disoriented, Billy. And so it took everything I had to try to explain to her what had happened. And I said to her, you need to call 911. You need to call the emergency line. It's 911 here in the States. Also, what was happening was I went from being completely disoriented, shooting pain, difficulty with breathing, to a situation of hyperventilating. And so I said to my wife, go get a plastic bag or a paper bag, bring it over right away. She did, because when you breathe in carbon dioxide, it slows your breathing down. So I was able, that helped a lot to get the breathing back under control. But Billy, to tell you that I was in a bad way, it was pretty bad. So the EMS show up. And I think first the firemen showed up, and they give me oxygen, doesn't do anything. The EMS show up, they're trying to figure out what's going on. They're checking vitals. Blood pressure is, has skyrocketed, had gone way up. That's probably because of all the stress that my body was experiencing. It was a huge amount of stress. It was an incredible amount of anxiety that was just building. So they put me in the back of the EMS vehicle, and it's off to the emergency room. And this happened at 8:30 in the morning. So I get to the emergency room, and they right away bring me in, EKG. They x-rayed my lungs. I believe they also did a CAT scan. And to make a long story short, everything came back fine. Lungs were clear. No problems came through with the EKG. And the CAT scan was all clear. So the doctors couldn't figure out what the problem was. They were dumbfounded.
Was it still ongoing at this point?
It had subsided, but it was still like the after effects of this. And I'll get into the after effects. So there was this initial thing at 8:30 in the morning where I experienced this event, and it went on for a while, because by the time it took a little while to get everything kind of understood, call 911, get the emergency folks over, them checking me out, and then them rushing me off to the hospital. So I'm at the hospital and things are better, although I feel like a live wire, fried. The nerves, the stress, the anxiousness, it was just all one big ball of confusion. So anyway, they send me home after a few hours. The after effects went on for at least 3 months, where it was very difficult. The shooting pain was constant. And I was very concerned that I had something wrong with my heart. Breathing was a big problem as well. What happened was I could not take a deep breath and get over the hump. Now, think about that from the standpoint of not being able to do it like at all. It's a very disturbing feeling when you need to take a deep breath and you can't get over the hump.
Yeah.
There was a lot of feeling disoriented, detached, feeling like I was floating, and severe fatigue. The chest pains, like I said, behind my shoulder blade, my left shoulder blade, down the arm, occasionally into the leg. I had to go see a cardiologist, and I was on a heart monitor for a week to make sure that everything was okay with my heart. I had to go to a pulmonary doctor to make sure that everything was okay with my lungs. So the good news is, even though I was thinking something was terribly wrong from a heart perspective, my cardiologist got the results back. And the way I should explain the heart monitor for those that don't know. So you wear this monitor, so you're connected up. You got those little cups and you're wired up. And there's an app that's on your phone, and it constantly monitors. If something doesn't go right, then what happens is the company notifies the doctor immediately, but nothing happened. So when I met with the cardiologist after the heart monitor was taken off, he said to me, "Mike, there's nothing wrong with your heart." And I said, "Well, thank you. That's very good news." The pulmonary doctor said to me that he looked at the x-rays from the hospital and he said, "Your lungs are clear." And then he was thinking in terms of, well, maybe it's like adult asthma and so on. He's going down this road. And I said to him, well, this doesn't make any sense to me, because prior to 8:30 in the morning on December 15th of 2019, I didn't have any asthmatic issues, nor did I have any shooting pains in my chest or any of that stuff. He says, well, we're going to treat you as if you have asthma. I said, okay, but do I or do I not have asthma? It's very weird the way they worded it. So they put me on a steroidal inhaler. I was on that for a little bit. The amount of benefit from the steroidal inhaler was extremely marginal. In other words, it didn't work. They gave me an emergency inhaler. That didn't work. So none of the pharmaceuticals that they had to help with breathing was working. So this persisted now for a good, like I said, 3 months, 3.5 months. So from December 15th of 2019 up through when I uploaded the presentation on April 1st of 2020. So that period of time in there was extremely difficult. How difficult was it? My wife had to drive me around. She was essentially my chauffeur. When I got up to do something, I felt like I was floating and disoriented, and I had to sit right back down again. And I'm talking, Billy, walking from the couch in the living room to the kitchen. So I'm talking about, what, 20 feet?
Yeah. So this is the time that all the COVID stuff's kicking off. Are you thinking, I've caught some mad Japan Chinese
Well,
disease?
no, there was at this point, when I went in there was no COVID, right?
Yeah, just as it was progressing.
Never came up. Here's the thing. The reason why it wasn't COVID, was because there was, whatever COVID was. Let's just say it wasn't the flu. Okay. We'll just say, because I had no flu symptoms. I didn't have a fever. I didn't have a cough. I wasn't sneezing. I didn't have a fever. I was perfectly healthy before 8:30 in the morning on December 15th of 2019. And then all hell broke loose at 8:30. The other weird thing that happened was my whole chest area was extremely sensitive. When I went to go take a shower, the water from the shower head was so irritating to me, almost painful. And I even explained this to my doctor. I said, I don't know what this is, but when I try to take a shower and the water hits my chest, I can't stand it. It's unbearable. The sensitivity is unreal. And of course, they didn't have an answer for that. So the way I had to shower was to turn my back to the shower head and let the water run off my shoulders and then just go down my chest. And even then, it was bothering me, but it wasn't nearly as irritating or
Disturbing.
painful as when it was the shower where the water would just hit the chest directly. So if you go back in time, you can see that I was struggling with this stuff. I did a Christmas video on December 25th of 2019, 10 days after the event. And I was very subdued. And that's because it took everything I had to sit in front of the computer to be able to do this. That was the other thing. If I sat down to try to do some work in front of the computer, it was extremely challenging. I don't know what was going on, but I would start to feel sick. I would start to feel ill. And I would have to shut the computer down and walk away. And between the period of December 15th of 2019 and when I uploaded the video on April 1st of 2020, I only did 2.5 hours runtime of videos. So think about that. It's only 2.5 hours of content over a 3.5 month period of time. That's not a lot. And the reason why it wasn't a lot was because I really couldn't sit in front of the computer. And 2 of those videos were very short. I think one was like a minute and another one was 40 seconds. They were just some clips that I found of Billy, and I just put them up with some captions to explain, what was going on. Half of that 2.5 hours was a show I did with Owen Benjamin. So I did a show with Owen on January 17th of 2020, and it took everything I had to be able to sit there and to do the show with him. And there were times when I was doing the interview with him when I thought to myself, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it to the end of the show. And I kept thinking to myself, this could be a little embarrassing if I have to say to him, hey, Owen, I've got to go. I don't feel well. But I was able to stick it out. A couple of really weird things happened perception-wise as I was going through this. One of the things was, like I said, Billy, extreme fatigue. So things I would normally be able to do outside, I couldn't do it. I would maybe be able to do something for 5 or 10 minutes, and then I would have to sit down and take a break. Here's some very strange things. this stuff happened. So I'm not thinking in terms of some kind of nefarious act at this point. I mean, the thought crossed my mind, but I guess as a coping mechanism, you just don't want to go there because it's very disturbing to think that something like this can happen. Something non-physical can debilitate you, can literally take you to your knees. So mentally, I just kind of tucked it away.
The idea that this could be a target, basically.
A target, right, was something that I just didn't want to go down that path. I didn't want to go down that road. There was a couple of times, 1 or 2 times, when she said, do you think you can walk today? Do you think we could go to the park and go for a short walk? And I said, yeah, I think I could do that. This is where I got to. I went from being able to walk at the park, go around 2 or 3 times, no problem, walking 3, 4, 5 miles, to I'm hoping I can make it a short distance in the park just to get some exercise. And there was 1 or 2 times, one for sure, I remember, where I got in the car, my wife drove because I couldn't drive. And when I got there and I went to get out of the car, I just couldn't. I said, I can't do this. She said, okay, no problem. We'll go back home. When I was walking, and like I said, it was labored because my breathing wasn't very good. But, I would walk slowly and just take my time because I was thinking, okay, I've got to work to build my respiratory system back up. And so I'll just take it nice and slow. But at one point, when we were walking around the park, there's a sidewalk. And as I was walking, Billy, I kid you not, for like about 5 seconds, everything went into slow motion. Everything just slowed down to a crawl. And then I just stopped. And my wife said to me, are you okay? And I said to her, well, you're not going to believe this. And I said to her, I know I'm sounding crazier and crazier as this goes on. I said, but everything slowed down like I was in a slow motion movie. And then, like I said, it lasted a very short period of time, 4 or 5 seconds. And then everything went back to normal speed. There were other times when if I was just standing in place, it felt like the scenery around me was drifting away from me. I wasn't moving, but things were drifting away. And other times it felt like I had a perception or a vantage point up above my body and looking down. Very, very weird stuff. And so the first 3 months of this were the most difficult. I would say starting in April, things started to get better slowly. And I started working my way back into my routine, but I had to take things very, very slowly. The fatigue piece of this thing was still lingering. The breathing issue was getting better, but I was still struggling with that a little bit. And eventually the shooting pains across my chest and my back and so on went away. It was a very, very scary time. I sat down with my wife. We talked about it a couple of times. And finally I said to her, I said, there's a possibility that this wasn't like some kind of natural health occurrence. And she said to me, I thought the same thing. She says, hon, I think it's possible that you may have been targeted.
Yeah, there's many people out there who get targeted.
Yeah. So, Billy, for the longest time, I didn't want to go down that path. I didn't want to think about that. It's a scary thought.
Do you think it was because of your exposing the Beatles, or is it just everything that you're doing?
This is speculation on my part. Can I say for sure with absolute certainty that it was some kind of electromagnetic, some kind of frequency-based situation where I was targeted? No, I can't. That's part of how this works, right? You can't put your finger on it.
Yeah.
Is it because of the work, the research on the Beatles, in particular about whether they wrote all their own music or not and played on all of their recorded tracks? I believe that that's very possible. Because before me, I don't really know of anybody who was taking a look at the Beatles story and researching it and analyzing it the way I did. I mean, it's one thing to talk about the swapping out and the replacement of Paul McCartney. I mean, that goes back decades. And they're not going to care about that. They're not going to care about that because they know, when I say they, I'm talking about the controllers, they know that when people talk about Paul McCartney not being Paul McCartney, that he was replaced or swapped out back in 1966, that the overwhelming majority of the population is just going to laugh and say that you're some kind of nut job, right?
Yeah.
So they don't concern themselves about that. But when I started talking about the music, I think that that was a whole different ball of wax for them. Leading into this, when I was doing the work on the presentation, I had 3 or 4 discussions with somebody, and I'm not going to say who this person is, but they were somewhat connected into the Beatles machine. In the conversations I had with them, we had some emails, but there were I think there were 3 or 4 phone calls too. This person said to me, Mike, are you really sure about this? That this whole thing with Rubber Soul and they didn't write the songs. Perhaps they did write the songs, but they propped up the story by saying that they showed up with nothing and they did 16 songs in 30 days in order to build a bigger aura around the Beatles. In other words, to make them more magnificent than they already were. And I said, I mean, that's one way to look at it, but I think that they didn't come in with any songs. I said to him that, as I was looking at this, I concluded that this was the process. This was the model. The songs were pre-written, pre-recorded, and they came in and did the vocals, especially between 1962 and 1966. So at one point, this person said to me, I'll never forget the words. He said, Mike, there are people that don't want this information out there. And I said, I understand. I said, I understand that there are people that don't want this information out there. I said, but I'm going to put it out there. My attitude was, it's just research. You can listen to it. You can hear it out. If it resonates with you, fantastic. If it doesn't resonate with you, then go about your business. Like I always say in my shows, and I've said it many times, I wasn't doing this to convince anybody of anything. I liked doing the research, and I liked presenting the research and putting the alternative story out there for people to consider. So anyway, things started to get better for me health-wise. It's 3.5 years later, and I'm not 100%, Billy. I still have some residual issues with respiratory, although it's much better. I was looking and searching to figure out how I can get my respiratory system back on track. This is a product that did wonders. All their pharmaceuticals did zilch, but this product here, it's made by a company called Ridgecrest, and it's called Clear Lungs. And this version is Clear Lungs Sport. So initially I was taking 2 or 3 of these a day, and over time, things were getting better for me. In fact, I still take this supplement to this day. It's 3.5 years later, I still take it. So anyway, it was a harrowing experience. It was a nightmare. As I told Jay in the email, I forward you a copy of that email so that you can see, before we got going with the show here, what it is I was going to talk about. So I have been thinking for at least a year about sunsetting the Beatles research, because I've gotten to the point where it's diminishing returns. I've put a lot of content out. I've covered a lot of ground. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, and I've had discussions with my wife with this as well. I mean, my wife is my best friend. I talked to her about everything, and I said to her that I don't really feel motivated to do this anymore. So as I'm having these thoughts, Jay reaches out to me. I did a show with Jay going back, I don't know, maybe it was a year ago. I'm not good with dates, so maybe 9 months ago, a year ago. And it was one of the best interviews I think I've ever done. We had a great discussion. And so he emailed me and he said, hey, I want to do a documentary on the Beatles based upon the alternative narrative. And I remember I was, at first, I was like, I don't know, a couple of things. One, because, like I said, I felt like I had gotten to the point where it is diminishing returns. The other thing is there are other priorities in my life. I have 2 grandchildren now. My grandson is almost 2. My granddaughter is 2 months old. You know, my wife and I have got our own life. There's things that we want to do, and there are things that we do. And this Beatles stuff is not something that I do all the time. But when I was doing it, it was occupying a lot of my time, and at times too much of my time. And I said to him, look, I can help you when and where I can, but I cannot dedicate a lot of time. In other words, I can't overinvest myself in this because I have other priorities. My wife and our moms are in their 80s, and we spend time caring for them. My mom's going to be 89. My wife's mom's going to be 86. So we have that. We have the grandchildren, and we just have life in general that, you know, that we want to we want to experience. And
Did you also not mention to me that you were actually getting a heavy feeling when you started to do this? There's almost like
yeah,
things coming back almost. Or,
yeah. So that's where I was going with this. I gave Jay those. Initially, I was telling him, I was kind of setting the table that I want to help you, but I can help you in a limited capacity, maybe in some kind of consulting capacity. But the way it would have panned out, being in a consulting capacity was just not going to really work, because who was the main guy, right? Me. So the other researchers, they're fantastic researchers, but they would have their segment that they would look at. So we would talk about maybe Billy's family tree. Stacy was going to talk about that. Sally could talk about the discovery of Billy's eye. We had somebody lined up to talk about Tavistock and the Frankfurt School. So, and somebody to talk about the occult aspects of the Beatles. So it wouldn't be the Mike show, because I didn't want it to be the Mike show. If it was going to be the Mike show, then just interview me, or I could do my own presentation from beginning to end. And like I said, there's a lot of really good research out there by my colleagues, and I wanted to be able to give them some airtime and exposure to put their stuff out there. But the truth of the matter is, Billy, it's the point that you got to. I said in the email I wrote you and I wrote to Jay, underneath all of this, the truth was there was a heaviness about getting involved. And call it PTSD, call it whatever you want to call it, going back to December 15th of 2019. There was a heaviness hanging over me. And there was this voice in my head that was saying, Mike, don't do it. Don't do it. I was sitting on our porch with my wife going back about a week ago or so. And I sat down and she says, you look like you're deep in thought, lost in thought. I said, I am. I'm really struggling with this. I want to help Jay. I said, but there's this part of me that's saying, don't go there. And she said to me, well, hon, if you're having those feelings, then don't do it. You see, it's one thing to do podcasts. It's another thing when you're going to do a film. And that film could wind up wherever Jay was planning on distributing that film. Potentially, it could have ended up on Netflix. So I thought, okay, well, if the situation that I experienced back in December of 2019 was something nefarious and I was targeted, then doing this film and being the focal point of the film, where I would be doing the narrating, where I would be the person behind the camera asking my colleagues the questions pertaining to their research, I said, you know what? Probably not a good idea.
so you're basically apprehensive about being targeted again.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly it. That, like I told Jay, I have no intentions of experiencing what I experienced 3.5 years ago.
But you still have been putting out work there and talking about the same topic. It's not like you've let it lie since then.
That's the thing, I went and put the presentation up anyway. That's the interesting piece of this thing. If if it was a situation where I was targeted, I think it was a message that they were looking to see if I would just fold my cards and go home. And I didn't, and I put the information out. But what did happen 6 months after I uploaded the video, when I first put it up, I had a John Lennon song, a segment, a piece, 40 seconds of John Lennon's song God, where he sings, I don't believe in this, I don't believe in that, I just believe in Beatles.
I don't believe in Beatles.
I don't believe in Beatles, right?
I just believe
And
in Yoko and me.
And I thought, well, that was a great way to wrap up the presentation. So when I was creating Did the Beatles Write All Their Own Music, what I would do periodically as I was working on it, I would save a draft and I would upload it in private mode to YouTube to see if YouTube's Content ID would pick up copyright issues.
Right.
And if the video would be blocked worldwide. So I put 40 seconds of Lennon's song God in the presentation, and I uploaded it in draft mode. And Content ID caught it and said UMG is the publisher, and they're going to pick up their share of the revenue from the presentation. By the way, I didn't get anything from that presentation because there was an assortment of copyrighted material, which is what's going to happen when you put something together like that. You have to rely on copyrighted content in order to build the story appropriately.
But you got fair use of it.
Right, it's the fair use. So I didn't lose any sleep over that. I said, fine, it's a great song to end the presentation with, so fine, UMG, pick up whatever it is that you're going to pick up. But then 6 months later, in October of 2020, when the presentation had hit 50,000 views, I sign on to my account, my YouTube account, and the video is blocked worldwide. So UMG went from saying it's okay to 6 months later, nope. So it crippled the video until I was able to replace Lennon's song God with a copyright-free song, royalty-free song that YouTube allows you to insert. And that put the video back up. The point I'm trying to make is that I believe there was an effort after 50,000 views. I mean, maybe they just didn't think it was going to have legs. Maybe they just didn't think that a lot of people were going to watch it.
Yeah.
I mean, 50,000 people, when you think about it, in the scope of the number of Beatle fans,
Yeah.
It's a drop in the bucket if it's that, but evidently it did catch their attention. They just blocked it altogether. So it is interesting to me that after I did release it, what I presented made its way into memoirs. I don't ask Tom what it is that he's putting in the book. Even if I did ask him, he's not going to tell me what he's putting in the book. And I don't discuss with Tom what I'm working on research-wise that's going to wind up in a presentation. I will send him a presentation or a video after I've completed it and it's up on YouTube to say, hey, look, I did this one. Let me know what you think. So in this case, what happened was I finished up the presentation, did the Beatles write all their own music? And I gave him a preview. I think it was maybe a day or two before it went up on April 1st of 2020. And I knew that he was updating memoirs because he said to me that he was in the process of updating and there was going to be some new footnotes and stuff like that. But I had no idea what was going to be in the book, nor did I care, to be honest. I had my own work to focus on. And then when the updated version of memoirs came out, it was referencing whether they wrote all their own music or not. And it was essentially validating my work.
Did you not get a mention in the book?
There's a mention in the book in a footnote that has to do with Crowley. And there's a mention in the book with regard to Steve Faber's work on the Standing Stone in Scotland. And it says, in an interview that Steve did with Mike Williams, and it goes on to talk about the Standing Stone.
Right.
So those are the mentions. But Tom had gotten back to me and said, after he watched the presentation, and said, I think you might be pleasantly surprised what the new edition of Memoirs is going to contain.
Right.
And I thought, okay, is that synchronicity?
Or are they on watching your computer and seeing what you're working on?
Or is that something else?
Do you know what I mean? Because anything we do on our computers, I think somebody's got access to, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. And like I said, I just didn't give it much thought. The way I approached the research was, hey, it's just research. If you agree with it, like I said before, if it resonates with you, fantastic. If it doesn't, fantastic. It doesn't matter to me. Go on with your
If
life.
somebody comes back and says something else, you can say, oh, you can learn from that. Or, you know, that's the whole point.
Right.
Put your ideas out there, and then that's how they grow, and you see what feels right and what becomes less right after time.
Yeah.
So it was a valuable piece of work, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was. There's a couple of things that have come out of my research and my channel. One is my work on the music. Second is Sally's discovery of Billy's artificial eye, and Stacy's work on the possibility of his family tree going back to the Douglas Hamiltons and the Percy bloodline. Those are the three in my mind that stand out. So it is interesting that once I released it, everything seemed to be okay from the standpoint of I didn't have any other events or experiences like that. Now, to cap things off, the last three interviews that I did, I talked about the Beatles as a psychological operation being tied back to the Frankfurt School and Tavistock, which I've talked about before, but I got a lot more specific about the cultural Marxist agenda. And so those shows are coming up within the next couple of months. I already have them scheduled. They're already done.
Well, these are presentations.
These are interviews that I did where I take the audience step by step through how the Beatles play into that cultural Marxism agenda.
Well, John Lennon's song Imagine is that in a nutshell.
Oh, yeah, Imagine, and some of his other songs. If you read the lyrics to Mind Games, playing those mind games together, when you read those lyrics and he's talking about druid dudes and stuff like that, I've thought to myself, what's a mind game? A mind game is a psychological operation. A mind game is propaganda. A mind game is conditioning. It's mind control.
Yeah. I think there's so much more to all these lyrics than, you know.
Yeah. So I'm capping it off with that. And I just felt like, I don't know, Billy, getting involved in the documentary, knowing what happened back in December of 2019, I just didn't want to walk around with a big bullseye on my back. Because like I was saying, there's a difference between doing a podcast and doing a presentation on your YouTube channel, of which I have maybe 21 or 22,000 subscribers on my Beatles channel and 43,000 on my main channel. So let's just say, 65,000 subscribers, and a documentary that could just take off.
It's certainly a topic that many people are interested in, the Beatles. So if that can end up on Netflix, that's a huge potential audience right there.
Yep. And there could have been money in it and all that stuff, but money was never a motivator for me. I'm not motivated by money. I'm motivated by what I like to do.
I mean, is Jay going to stop the documentary, or could he still use your work?
I offered up to Jay, I said, look, if you want to do a long interview and I'll walk the audience cradle to grave through the entire timeline, going back to the Frankfurt School, Tavistock, talking about the cult of Pan, the cult of Dionysus, Crowley, all of this stuff is all tied together, all of it. And how the Beatles were a big tool in the controller's toolbox to implement this disruptive agenda to tear down traditional values, institutionalize religion in order to implement the New Age, Crowley's Aeon of Horus. And it is a Marxist agenda. I'm going to wrap it all up with those shows to put the cap on it. After that, I really don't see much more work that I'll be doing with regard to the Beatles research. It's like I said, it's diminishing returns. I've done as much as I could possibly do. I don't want to make a lifetime out of this. A lot of people like it because I call it conspiratainment. It's entertaining to them. They don't really understand what it really means, the impact that the whole story has. I'm talking about the Beatles story and what they were all about on society and culture.
when I do comedy or poetry or whatever, and you're doing your thing, I'm not doing it just to entertain. I want to wake people up and we all start talking and take action and let's change the world. And, but
Yeah.
unfortunately, people don't really, we just get up the next day and everyone goes to work and the rat race continues. But, certainly your work has had a profound effect on many people's perceptions of not just the Beatles, but the whole rock industry. Talk about what's the difference, the Wrecking Crew and all these things. These things are all much more common knowledge. The Weird Scenes from the Canyon, who's that guy?
Dave McGowan.
Dave McGowan, he was obviously another one that kicked all this off, and Mark Devlin's done a lot of good work on it as well. People need to be aware of all this stuff. But the point of being aware of it, and the whole Beatles thing in particular, it can go down, as you say, all these different avenues, and then we get to who's the controllers of society and why we're letting them do it.
Right.
Because it has to come to some point of stopping. Because I get tired of just the entertainment and the conspiracy on just everybody's. It's a thing, People are making careers out of being a conspiracy researcher or whatever instead of stopping the train or
Right.
starting to take action on this stuff. Because in the meantime, the agenda's still plowing ahead.
A lot of them are just running on a treadmill. It's a job. They're collecting revenue off their channels, and that's fine. I mean, everybody has to work, but I think we all have to keep in mind that there are some people out there that they do it because it's a paycheck. But the moral of the story is, for me, I don't know with 100% certainty what took place on December 15th of 2019. But in the back of my mind, I do believe that I do know. If I'm honest with myself, like I said, very good health on December 14th. And then everything was turned upside down. And, I'm thinking about everything I talked about here. And I probably still didn't do it justice, Billy, as far as how disruptive it was to my life and what a nightmare it was. It was a total nightmare. I talked about these perception things. I talked about feeling like all of a sudden everything slowed down, right, to slow motion. Another thing was when my wife was driving me around, because I could not drive. I could not sit behind the car because I would start to feel disoriented. So I was in the passenger seat. So when we got to a red light and she started to pull away, now she's pulling away slowly. My perception was everything was rushing at me. And I remember a couple of times saying to her, "Oh, you have to slow down." And I remember she was looking at me and she said, "Hon, I'm doing like 5 miles an hour."
Crazy.
It was awful. It was really awful. We went to there was a dinner party at a local restaurant with the family. She said, "Do you think you can do it? Can you go?" And I said, I want to go. I think I can do it." So I get in the car and I'm not feeling right at all, but trying to keep a stiff upper lip. And I keep saying to myself, I can do this. I can do this. And so I get to the restaurant, and Billy, I'm not seated more than 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I just had this rush of anxiety that just overwhelmed me. And I felt like I have to go. Let me just explain this. I never had any issues with anxiety. I never had panic attacks. I worked in the corporate world for over 30 years. And there were many, many times when my job was extremely stressful. And I was always a cool customer. I always handled stress very, very well.
You've also done lots of NLP and stuff like that, so those techniques as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, meditation, all of this. I was doing a lot of meditation during this period of time to be able to get everything calmed down again. I remember the doctor saying to me, "Well, maybe it was a panic attack." I said, let me just tell you right now, don't even go there, okay? A, I've never had a panic attack in my life. 2, 8:30 in the morning. At 8:29, I was calm, rested, had been up about an hour, hour and a half, finishing up a cup of coffee, and all of a sudden, boom. The feeling I got, Billy, was boom, through my body. And I just remember sitting there at the island, and all of a sudden I felt this woozy feeling. And I said, I don't know what that was. I have to get the phone. I got to call my wife. You need to come home because something's not right. And then, like I mentioned earlier, everything went south. I remember the dog was looking at me, even the dog was like, what the hell is going on? And I remember I was down on the floor and I looked up and I saw Pablo and then my thoughts went to, what is going on here? I can't get my body under control. Billy, it's almost impossible to put into words. It was a feeling where you lost all voluntary movement. Everything was involuntary. Falling to the floor, on my knees, trying to get up, yelling. I just couldn't get it together. And the thoughts in my mind, I've got to get to the phone. I've got to get to the phone. And when I went to bed at night and I had the heart monitor on, my wife, she's next to me and she said to me, how are you feeling? And I'm telling you, Billy, I'm not being dramatic here, okay? I said to her, I don't know if I'm going to wake up in the morning. That's how bad it was. That day, I was pretty sure the possibility of dying was on the table.
Right.
I mean, that's how bad it was. That I wasn't sure I was going to make it through whatever took place on December 15th.
As it was happening.
As it was happening. And then afterwards, when I was on the couch, my wife looked at me and she said, Mike, the fear in your eyes, she says, it was just radiating out like something was terribly, terribly wrong. And like I said, all the pains, the chest pains, they persisted. And I would go to bed at night, having a lot of difficulty with trying to catch a breath, getting over the hump, pains going through my chest, my back, and having these thoughts like I might not be here in the morning. That's how fucked up it was.
Do you think I mean, you say targeted. Have you any idea the technology or how they would do something like that, or who could be doing it? I mean, do you think they have technology that can do this kind of thing?
You know, I don't know. Of course, I am very aware of targeted people. Now, I'm not saying I'm a targeted person, but is it possible I was targeted on that day and maybe for a period of time afterwards because the symptoms persisted? I mean, they persisted on a steady basis as far as keeping me off balance and disoriented and having pains and breathing issues for at least 3 months before it started to get better.
It looked like a bang attack and then recovering from that, or do you think it was a constant whatever's going on?
I don't know. I think that, you know, obviously there was if it was a targeted attack. Okay, again, folks, I'm saying if, right? But I think it probably was. There was the initial hit to send me into a spiral, because that's really what it was. I was spiraling, and then after that, maybe something that was just pulsing me on a fairly consistent basis to keep the discomfort in place.
Yeah.
And then at some point it was, okay, well, we'll leave him alone now. And then he's going to need a number of months to recover from all of it. So that's why, again, I know I'm going back to what I already talked about here, but when I got to doing the documentary, Billy, I had a bad feeling. It was a haunting feeling telling me, don't do it. Don't do it, Mike. Don't do it. I even said to my wife, I said, I just feel like there's something on the horizon where a shoe is going to drop. And that's what it was. It was like, if I engaged on something like this as high profile, that there could be a problem.
So now that you've pulled out, do you feel that weight lifted and that potential?
Yeah. Yep. I mean, that's the thing. Here's the thing, right? So every Wednesday, my mom's going to be 89 years old. My brother and I, we take my mom to brunch. My daughter sometimes can make it. She takes the kids. And so I had my grandson. I had him by the hand, and I'm taking him into the diner. And I remember looking at the little guy, and I'm talking to him, and I'm thinking to myself, this is what it's all about. This is what I need to be here for. I need to be here to see him grow up, to be a positive influence in his life, to be there for my daughter and my brother-in-law and my granddaughter as well. That is what it's all about. Not the fucking Beatles. You know, I did what I did for 8 years with the Beatles. You have to know when you have no more runway. When it's, you know, you have to know when it's wheels up.
Yeah.
And that's the point I've reached. It's wheels up. It's like, okay, this is going to be behind me now. And I've got some really, really beautiful things in my life that I'm going to focus on. And it's not going to be this. Because let me tell you something. This whole thing with the Beatles, when you really dig into it, there's a lot of dark shit, Billy.
Oh yeah.
And I try not to delve too deeply into that stuff. I will talk about it. I will mention it. But a lot of times I try to do an end run around it. I'll give you the basics. And then if you want to go deeper or whatever, knock yourself out. I don't want to dive into the murky waters of the abyss and swim around in it. For what? For what? What is it going to mean at the end of the day? All it's going to do is it's just going to contaminate you with all of this dark crap, this heavy stuff. And I didn't want any part of it. That's the story. And this is the first time that I've come out to talk about it. I have shoved it in the desk drawer and just didn't talk about it. Yeah, my wife and I would occasionally talk about it, but that was it. And I finally had to tell Jay, because I didn't want Jay to think that I was just being difficult. I wanted to talk to you about it because you're a good friend.
The chance to talk about it, I feel as though, just watching you, I feel as though a weight's actually come off you sharing this as well, and knowing that your audience will hear that as well, so that when you do eventually hang up the video and the Beatles stuff anyway, then they'll know why. So
yeah, they'll know why. And like I said, I don't know why nothing happened after I released the big presentation. I was suffering the repercussions for months afterward, but nothing like December 15th. So I don't know. Maybe they just decided, well, you know what? It's out there now, and maybe in their minds it had an impact to a certain degree, but not such an impact that it means anything to them. Do you know what I'm saying?
Or they basically were giving you a warning, so when this time comes around, you're backing off because you realise there's dark shit involved. So it's just
Yeah.
And then just giving you that warning and let you do your thing. But at the end of the day, you've got to follow your intuition, and there's dark feelings and heavy vibes. Then don't engage. Basically, it's common sense,
Billy, it was overwhelming. The feeling and the sense, my intuition, my soul. Every time I did something to help to get things coordinated and get the ball rolling with Jay, the stronger the feeling got to step back.
Right.
I remember, like, I would be typing an email out to the other researchers and saying, okay, so this is where we're at. We were in a concept phase on this thing. And as I'm typing it, I'm just feeling the sense like, shit, I shouldn't be doing this. I need to step back from this. And and then what happened was, I almost forgot this part. So in our previous discussion, I said that we got Tom on board. Well, I'm not going to get into great detail, and I have a lot of respect for Tom, but Tom's level of participation, as I had anticipated, did not pan out. So these are my words, all right? I perceived it as Tom kind of stepping back from it. And when I got that sense, I thought that might be a red flag.
Well, that's what I was saying with the book, and you doing the working and him putting it in the book. It seems almost like Paul's wanting this out and you're helping to get it out. But then again, if he's stepping back from it, then maybe it's not all right in that side, and you're seeing that and saying, well, after what happened to me. Does Tom know about that, by the way?
Does Tom know about this?
About the episode? Yeah.
No, he doesn't know anything about it. And the other thing here is, folks, if it was a situation where I was targeted, you have to be very careful about what you're diving into. Because if it's a situation where you are too close to the target, then stuff can happen to try to derail you, to get you off the trail. Anyway, there was something else that we wanted to talk about too.
George Martin's son.
Oh, yeah. Well, we won't spend too much time on this, but the only reason why I'm covering this is because I've been asked by a number of people about Gregory Paul Martin, who is George Martin's oldest son from George Martin's first marriage. For those of you who are familiar with memoirs, you probably know that Gregory Martin wrote the foreword to the book, and he also did the narration, the voiceover for the audio book. Okay?
Which is quite involved, really.
It is quite involved. Yes, it is. And what happened going back about 2 years ago, there was another researcher, it wasn't me, because I would never troll anybody. And Gregory likes to talk about his astrology. And this one particular person kept asking about his participation in memoirs and doing the voiceover, the narration for the book. So I guess Gregory hit a point where he just got completely pissed off, and he wrote this post. I think it was on Facebook. I actually have the post, but I'm not going to share it. It doesn't matter. He was going on and on about, he thinks the whole Paul is dead conspiracy is bullshit. When he got into memoirs and doing the voiceover, he wasn't completely on board or aware of what the book was really all about. So I will tell you that I have the other side of the story. But what happened recently, back in April of this year, 2024, Gregory did 2 interviews, one with Mark Atwood and another one with Joe and Scott from the Truth Stream podcast. And in both those shows, the Beatles came up. And he was asked about the Paul is dead conspiracy. And in the show he did with Mark Atwood, he said that he's come around to thinking that the swapping out or the replacement of Paul McCartney was plausible. That's interesting, right? Coming from somebody from the Martin family, this conspiracy now could possibly be plausible. And then on the Truth Stream show with Joe and Scott, and I've been on their show twice. The second time I was on after Gregory was on, and he said that the same thing. He said that he thought that the swapping out of biological Paul McCartney was possible. And in both those shows, he also discussed a book that I guess he's going to publish soon called Blackbird. One thing he mentions specifically, and he mentioned it in both shows, he talks about his stepmother, Judy, George Martin's second wife, was a witch and into the black arts. Okay, now this is not me saying this. This is coming from the interviews. So I was listening and I thought, well, that's interesting because I've talked about how the Beatles are immersed as an entity into occultism. I'm not saying that the Beatles weren't aware of occultism, but there's a difference between being aware of occultism and being an occultist, right? Yeah. So anyway, so when I went on the Truth Stream show after Gregory was on, Scott and Joe asked me, hey, did you listen to the show with Gregory? I said, yeah, I did. And they said, what do you think? I said, obviously it helps the cause for him to come out and say that it's possible or plausible that a replacement took place. Well, that's a good thing. After that show, he retracted and went back to the official narrative that Paul has always been Paul. So I don't personally know what's going on. I don't know Gregory. I've never spoken to Gregory. He does his thing. I do my thing. From a speculation perspective, I've said to folks that maybe what happened was when he came out and said that the replacement of biological Paul with Billy was plausible or possible, that didn't go over well within the inner circle because it's emanating out from within the Martin family name.
But at the same time, the book Memoirs was on Billy's website, or the Paul McCartney website.
Well, it was on a website that Tom put together where he was promoting both the lyrics and memoirs together.
That wasn't a Paul McCartney official site. That was a Tom site with those 2 books on it.
Tom's site.
Even though the Paul lyrics one was an official release.
You and I couldn't do that. You and I couldn't put a website up like that and expect that we wouldn't get some kind of cease and desist letter saying, take your website down. You're not authorized to sell that book or to have it up with that other book, The Memoirs of Billy Shears, because there would be a perception problem with branding if it wasn't approved.
Yeah. So
this is the same issue we have with all of the lyrics to Beatles songs being in memoirs.
They couldn't be in there unless they were approved for copyright.
They have to be approved because lyrics are copyrighted and the copyright owner of the lyrics wants to ensure that their brand is not being impacted or tainted in any way if somebody takes their lyrics as an example and they write the narrative is disparaging toward the music or toward the lyrics.
Yeah.
So you're going to say, well, what's your book all about? Well, we're talking about corruption in the music industry and we want to use your... No, you're not doing that because you're associating my song and my lyrics with corruption. No, you don't have my approval to do that. It's brand integrity. So why would the McCartney Enterprise or Billy's Enterprise allow the lyrics to be up on the same website with the memoirs of Billy Shears and be promoted that way? I would think that it wouldn't be allowed unless, like you said, Billy, it was approved.
So the fact that he's read this book in an audio version and in the foreword is already revealing it. But probably when he's going to interviews now, when he's starting to talk about it in interviews, maybe that's when the taps came. It's like reel it in.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, but like I said, the only reason why I'm bringing it up is because I've been asked about it, and I'm not going to comment on it any further. I don't know. And to be honest, at this point, I really don't care. People will have to decide for themselves where they land with this thing. It goes back to what I said before. If this is something that resonates with you and you believe the dots have been connected, then you're over here. If you don't believe the dots have been connected and you think it's all bullshit, then you're over here. That's just the way it's going to go. So in any case, so
you've got your channel, the Paul is Dead channel. You've got Sage of Quay channel. The Paul is Dead one will probably calm down a bit then, but are you going to continue doing other videos, or do you think you're hanging up your...
That's a good question. I mean, I will continue to blog. I mean, I started as a blogger. I will continue to blog. You know, Billy, I'm 65 years old. I've been doing this a long time. I've reached a point where the drive and the motivation to continue to do this stuff, I mean, you know this, it's repetitive, right? The same scripts keep getting played over and over and over.
Nobody's listening. They're still going to vote for politicians and they're still fucking taking jabs. It's like,
yes. And I've said everything I can possibly say. I've talked about just about every topic you can possibly talk about. I mean, before I got into the Beatles stuff, going back to 2014, I was talking about everything you could think of. And all of these topics are still being discussed. I feel like I've reached the end of the road. Like I've got cottonmouth. Why am I going to continue to talk about things that I've talked about for 12 years, 13 years, or whatever? I think I started the blog in 2011 or 2012. So let's just say 12 years ago with the blog, 10 years ago with doing the YouTube channel and podcasts. So I don't know. I think what's going to happen is the Beatles stuff will definitely sunset. And so the Paul is Dead channel I have, that'll be up there. It'll be up there for reference. It'll be archived. And people over time will figure it out, become interested, and they can watch the content and so on. And I get tons and tons of emails. And that's something else that, to be honest, that I really don't want to spend a lot of time dealing with on a daily basis. I don't want to sit in front of the computer all this time, you know, and for a long time, I've been sitting in front of the computer for more time than I actually want to. So I think what I'm going to do is just take a break and go off and go do things that are much more enjoyable in life. You know, we didn't come into this life to be immersed in all this crap and all of this darkness and this nonsense. There's so many good things in life that we need to engage in with your family and your friends. Like I was talking about my grandchild, you know, just holding the little guy's hand going into the diner to go have brunch. He's happy as can be, and he's just happy to be there with grandpa and the family, and he's smiling from ear to ear. Do I want to spend my time doing that, or do I want to spend my time digging into more Beatles shit? I vote for spending time with my grandson because that's a whole lot brighter and happier. And there's a whole story now that's going to unfold for the little guy as he grows into his life. And God willing, maybe I have 20 years left, Billy. I want to be able to be there for 20 years in some kind of sound capacity to be with him and my granddaughter and my daughter and her husband and for my wife and I. That's where I'm at.
That's cool. It's not like it's a job that you're leaving and you're in putting a gun to your head. You've done all this voluntary. And, you know, you shouldn't feel guilty or anything about walking away from it, because at the end of the day, you put the effort in that a lot of other people haven't done, and the work's there for them to review.
I don't feel guilty. My wife said to me, look at the body of work. Just look at what you've done. And that's always going to be there unless they decided to shut the entire internet down. That's always a possibility at some point. But let's just say for as long as it's up, some semblance of my content will be there one way or another. So do I feel guilty? No, I don't feel guilty. I put a lot of work into it, Billy. And I had a lot of great interactions with people. And I got to meet some great people, met you and so many other folks in the community, really good people who are solid, who are no bullshit. There's no agenda. And I appreciate those friendships. I do. And I'll continue to always have those friendships and stay in contact. Like, I'm not saying that I'm going to disappear off the face of the earth.
Well, I was going to say, if you fancy a rant about whatever's happening in the news, you're welcome to come on here and show your face every so often. And
yeah. Yeah, or I just might decide if something strikes my fancy to put a video up on my platform. Remember, I used to do the Clown World News, I did that for a while. Maybe I'll do Clown World News. I don't know. We'll see. Even that kind of wore out after a while because, like I said, it's the same script over and over.
I done 319 shooting the shit episodes, and it kind of got like that, just like I'm just regurgitating.
Yeah.
You've just told everybody, what's inside you, and just it's up to them to go and research it, figure it out themselves, because you telling somebody isn't going to give them perspective. They have to then want to go and run with it and do their own research.
Right.
So, again, putting the ideas out there, it's up to people now to take it on, because you've got to go and you've got other priorities. So life changes,
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want to be a lifer at this, Billy.
Any last thoughts you would like to leave us with?
No, Billy, just again, to the audience, everything I told you is the truth. It was not a good time in my life. To this day, I don't really know what happened. The doctors don't know. They were completely dumbfounded. They had no answers as to what happened. So, like I said, I do have to consider the fact that there was something nefarious going on that day, 8:30 in the morning on December 15th of 2019.
Yeah, well, again, you've got it out, so you hopefully feel a bit lighter.
Waves of desperation come crashing in again. Feeling the sensation, I need you to the end, don't you know? I need my baby, don't you know? I need my baby, don't let go. Assess the situation, the truth is plain to see. This abomination, there's only you for me, don't you know? I need my baby, don't you know? I need my baby, don't let go. Of desperation come crashing in again, feeling the sensation, I need you to the end, don't you know? I need my baby, don't you know? I need my baby, don't let go.